What's up, everybody? It's me, Majora T, and I'm doing a little video response to Mr. VGMashUP, and I thought I'd mash it up today with a fellow masher. Come on in.
All right. How you doing?
Hey,
How you doing, son?
Hey, what's up, Dad? Mr. Papa Mashup.
This is excellent.
Excellent indeed.
So 21st century.
I know. You got a phone that does everything for you. What more could you ask for? One of my friends in the YouTube community asked a Halloween video response question. What two franchises would you merge to create some Halloween themed game? Now, you know me. My expertise is not just relegated towards video games. I'm pretty well read, not as well read as yourself. But one direction that my mind erred towards was actually a piece of literature I read in college. It was Dante's Inferno.
Oh, gosh.
In the Divine Comedy. Do you like my chopstick bookmark?
Yeah.
So,
Multicultural.
yeah, I know.
Yeah. You're an inclusive kind of guy.
I would probably go in one of the stages of hell for this. But talk to me about your experience with Inferno and the Divine Comedy.
Well, I'm one of these people that, although I teach English now, I'm one of these people that really had a tough time as a high school kid and even as a college student with literature that was beyond me. So I hated Shakespeare. I hated the Inferno. I hated anything more complicated than Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Just good storytelling was all I could really handle. My mind wasn't really developed enough. Just basic developmental ability to and language I had and all those things. But so the Divine Comedy in Dante was one of those things that I steered away from. I tried it several times, in college, even as an English major. I started as a psych major, but ended up as an English major. Those complicated texts were things that I avoided, and did not really get to absorb and take as a challenge that I could master until later on in life. So but once that happened, I was able to approach Moby Dick or Dostoevsky's The Idiot or the Brothers Karamazov or something like that, even Tolstoy, sophisticated texts. And one by one, I was able to master them as I grew older and more sophisticated and experienced. And it was the context. I didn't have the context as a young kid for a lot of this stuff. But I never have had the context for Divine Comedy. Never. Still. And I don't have much time left on this earth, but hopefully, if there ever does come a time for me to have some material for it, to basis for understanding it, it's not here yet for me. So I'm really impressed that you're reading it.
Well, thank you, but I have to agree with you. It's pretty mundane. It might as well be a biblical text. I think we were discussing it, and it almost reads not as genealogy per se, where you read about like the transference of power across ancestries, but it's almost like the historical telling of peoples in Italy and a lot of these Greek gods and goddesses that we know. And I think that's probably why it's like has a place in this kind of like pop culture biblical fiction, is because it's like, oh, exciting, like we get to read about the Cerberus and the Medusa, and then you go through it and you have issues like a really dull protagonist, Dante, who's a poet, which I'm sure you see as kind of a sacrilege that the guy's so boring.
Very boring.
And even his companion, and I think there's also kind of a problem with maybe translation, like something being lost in translation in how it's brought to us.
Well, it definitely is missing the whatever beauty there is in the Italian language, or whether it's written in Latin or early Italian, which certainly doesn't communicate in English in that respect. There's no reveling in the quality and the beauty of the language that maybe occurs in Italian. I mean, you just raised an interesting point to me. To the extent that there's a cosmology of the 15th century, whenever the thing was written, famous people, it's got its equivalents of of Michael Jordan and Babe Ruth and Jay-Z and all sorts of characters that people in that point in time may have gone like, oh, I'm digging this because I'm reading about so-and-so. That's completely lost to us today.
Yeah.
To the extent that I'd be interested in opening up a pop culture of what century is it? Do you know? Whatever century it is. That would be an interesting, take on it to me.
I think so. And like there is room for people who are interested in the text and the mythology and the literature and also the humans at the time. You see some emperors come up in the text. There is room for it to be researched and understood. But like you, I don't have the time for that. I'm 30 years old and I don't I can read it, but a lot of it goes over my head. I'm not going to go out of my way to read the subscripts and learn about every one of these people.
Yeah. I think, I talked about that. I mean, it'd be a whole lot easier, of course, to read it electronically because then, you don't have all the annotation gumming up the works. And if you want to look at something like who is this, this particular pope, click. You just click it and you get a quick thumbnail of who that is and you come right back to the text. It's, it's less disruptive.
Beautiful. I think that's actually a good segue to what I was thinking. I was thinking, gee, this doesn't really work as a modern 21st century text for me as a 30-year-old or when I was in college or whenever you read it back in the days. But I think the text lends itself really well, not to the protagonist, but to the characters that come through all of the 9 or so cycles of hell and the people that you're introduced to. And there's so much potential for imagery and showcasing these characters that it could work really well in a video game format. What do you think?
The ancient, the old cathedrals and churches in Europe, when you go to see them, many of the people back in, a couple hundred years ago were illiterate. They were illiterate, but they would go to church, and the experience of going to church and learning anything more than like you get indoors outside of the snow on a Sunday morning, to the extent that they're learning something that they were being preached to in Latin, so they couldn't even pick up anything because they probably didn't speak Latin. What could they see in the front of the church between the common people coming to church and the altar? Was something like a wall called a rood screen, ROOD, and on that rood screen is huge, like paneled paintings of angels in heaven and what's happening to people in hell, and there's pitchforks and there's people being tortured, and they're gory pictures of people, so really detailed and colorful, like Hieronymus Bosch, and so. That was what they were learning from, and they were being frightened. But they were also being titillated and excited by the experience of seeing this, and they could relate to it because it was in pictures.
Sure.
So yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You could do You could do this in video game, and it would be some elaboration, some imagination, because you may not get it out of the text itself.
Yeah.
But by looking at other depictions of hell, back in those days, you could have plenty of material to develop it.
Sure. Actually, that I haven't been to like traditional church in a minute, not since, like maybe when y'all used to take me to church against my will. No, Mom, I don't want to go to church Christmas Eve. But, it reminds me, like you were saying, of like kind of those giant tapestries, like, like the glass stained windows and like the Michelangelo kind of painted stuff. So, I didn't even think about that. What I was thinking was like, this game could work really well as like kind of a virtual tour simulator, since that's pretty much what it is, in the book, the main character Dante goes on this kind of journey through hell with Virgil as a tour guide. And I think Virgil was already dead at that point. Yeah. And so what he does is he goes through these stages to see the crimes that people have committed, to learn from them, to chastise them, and he shudders away from them, but he learns and he sees his country's history. He reports to them. I think at each of the cycles, there's real potential to really see what the crimes are they're committing. For instance, one cycle of hell might have people who were hoarders, compared to people who were like whiners. I don't know what they were, not like drinking wine, but even though Dionysus is down there. And then in another
Oh,
stage,
really? Dionysus?
yeah, he's down there. There's a bunch of unexpected,
That's too bad.
famous people that. Yeah, what's he doing then? He guess he drank too much. But there's a lot of interesting characterizations, and not so much in the protagonist, but I think it would just be so cool as kind of like a history lesson to learn that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, and see my understanding of it is that when you say it's a journey of observation. The way that it's told,
Yeah,
it's like they're mapping out, guilt, sin, crime, and what the punishment is in these various levels of hell. It's like a big concentric circles with the worst and the deepest and the closest to the nucleus of it, right? And that was always my objection when I don't see the world as, that my main job in life is to avoid guilt and be afraid of sinning, and not that I want to sin, but having that as the basis and as a prescription for always never taking a step on earth without wondering what the implications are in hell.
Oh yeah, how dare I hoard cutlery or
I mean
whatever.
that's a guilt society that was telling those stories. Telling that story.
Yeah.
However, journey is journey, and one of those little intrepid little. What's that guy with the pipe and he's got the green cap?
Pan or something?
No, you're in your video game.
Oh, Zelda Link, whatever.
Yeah. Zelda Link. He's engaged in a journey. He's got to get through various levels and encounter problems.
Yeah.
Encounter difficulties. Encounter enemies. So why not? If you're at the 9th level of hell, he has to get through some hoarders or some drunks or something like that. So the characters that he has to beat at every level represent that level of hell's bad guy.
I have a personal objection to that. So this game, this text actually had. I'm already calling it a game. I'm already thinking it like that. Well, the funny thing is, it does have a game that came out on the PlayStation 2. And in that game, you played as some kind of holy crusader who would fight like these hordes of people, and Medusa would be in the background throwing stuff or whatever. Yeah. It's called a hack and slash. Yeah. Now, my problem with that is that it's a complete rewriting of the text and the main character.
Oh, right, okay.
We were discussing Dante and how he's kind of like a mama's boy.
Yeah.
And, he's going through the text like, no, Virgil, don't let them eat me, or what, and so my problem with turning it into an action game is that you lose some of that chance to absorb the history.
Okay, I got an alternative idea for you.
What are you thinking?
Because I don't play these games, and I haven't been able to read that.
Yeah.
So I'm shooting in the dark here.
Yeah.
Right. Understand? But doesn't Zelda have to collect in Zelda? He has to collect information. He gained knowledge, bits of knowledge, and it gives him more power to move on.
That's a good way to put it.
Right? So isn't it possible that the character going into Dante's Inferno has to discover knowledge and information and wisdom at these different levels in order to move forward?
Look at that.
I got it.
So I think what you're onto that I like is that the reward is that you gain the knowledge and that you learn about these things. I think just as kind of a veteran kind of player of these kind of adventure games, I would say maybe to make some of them optional and some of them mandatory.
Oh, right.
So you go through this cycle and you have to encounter Minos, who's like the guy with the horns or whatever. But in this text, he's actually like, somebody who spews knowledge. Yeah. Versus maybe you talk to your Tuscan comrades as kind of a side quest, and that would be something to help you fully, engross yourself in the lore.
Right, I get it.
There's 33 cantos here. That's a lot. I got through half of it. But there is some like really cool stuff. So while you're not going to be Dante fighting, Medusa and the 3 Gorgons, you could just observe them and
Well, see, I like that much better. It's actually. If there's anything I didn't like about the idea of video games being ignorant about them, I thought it was just fighting. You have to. It's like Donkey Kong.
Yeah,
that's all I thought that those games were. But if it's a quest for knowledge and understanding, it enhances your power and your status as a character. So that by the end of the thing, if you've been able to reach this innermost level and you've accumulated as much power and status and all wisdom that you possibly can. You come out at the end of the thing, you can reach the middle of the thing. But if you take the minimal route, you only get to be this good.
Yeah.
But if you take the most, you could gather extra points and
Yeah.
come out in the middle and beat the game, get all the way to the center of it, and come out like this big in terms of your wisdom.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what you and I are talking about is kind of an intellectual experience. I think video games are maybe somewhat behind in terms of reaching that kind of medium. For instance, there is a game that I've played that I like to poke fun at called Journey. That is the name of the game. It's just Journey, so I just call it Journey. Like I just make fun. But this is what they call a walking simulator. So when I say a walking simulator, all you do in the game is you walk. And there's no text, there's no dialogue in the game. You just start out the game and there's a mountain in the background, and all you know is like there's no directions. It's just like this is how you move. Go for it. And you're like, what am I doing? So you walk towards the mountain, and then it becomes this journey to the top of the mountain, which is supposed to be symbolic of like overcoming the mountain.
Right.
That game, people ate that up. They loved it. They said this was so powerful. It's so symbolic. There's a part on the mountain where the snow starts coming down, and then you can't actually walk any further. Then you wake up, and then suddenly you start climbing the mountain.
Yeah.
I think that's pacified. I think that is way too simplistic. And I mean, I understand. Well, maybe we could stereotype gamers and say they're not intellectuals, but I just don't agree with that. I think there is potential to do this, but there maybe is the risk of making it too convoluted in a pursuit of knowledge.
Right. I mean, convoluted in pursuit of knowledge, but quality of acquisition.
Sure.
Take Pokemon Snap.
Yeah.
You can go down that river and get that whatever that guy is to come up out of the river, and take a picture of him, and the picture may be good, okay, excellent. And then if you really do it, there's a fish hanging out of the back of his tail, and then you can take a picture of that too, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's more access and more quality oriented. So like you say, I mean, I've seen this in your Zelda game, looking over your shoulder many years ago, there actually is some talking going on. He goes up to some shop and he says something to the shop person. The shop person, what do you got here? And I got this kind of sword, that kind of sword. I forget what it was. But depending on the quality of the interaction, there's a different outcome in terms of what he gets access to.
But if it's not an action game, what is the tangible reward?
Well, a lot. I think that some of it's visual.
Yeah.
Some of it's visual. It's like, you're not even going to get to see the real ugly, creepy guys at level 3 unless you make it to level 3.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So, I mean, you have that anticipation. And maybe you got there once, or maybe you've never gotten there, so you don't even know what a kidnapper.
Yeah.
Or a pedophile. Is going to appear like until you encounter it. So the anticipation of finding out what these different characters are. That's one thing.
Let me read you the description of Satan, who's in the last canto. Okay, you're gonna love this. just try and visualize this as though you were there. Okay. Oh my gosh. All right. This is Canto 34, and I guess I'll start from Do Not Ask, Reader. Do not ask, reader, how my blood ran cold and my voice choked up with fear. I cannot write it. This is a terror that cannot be told. I did not die, and yet I lost life's breath. Imagine for yourself what I became, deprived at once of both my life and death. The emperor of the universe of pain jutted his upper chest above the ice, and I am closer in size to the great mountain the Titans make around the central pit than they to his arms. Now,
Super Jabba the Hutt.
Super Jabba the Hutt. Starting from this part, imagine the hole that corresponds to it. If he was once as beautiful as now he is hideous, and still turned on his maker, he may well be the very source of every woe. With what a sense of awe I saw his head towering above me, for it had 3 faces. One was in front, and it was fiery red. The other 2, as weirdly wonderful, merged with it from the middle of each shoulder, to the point where all converged at the top of the skull. The right was something between white and bile. The left was about the color that one finds on those who live along the banks of the Nile. Under each head, 2 wings rose terribly, their span proportioned so gross a bird. I never saw such sails upon the sea. They were not feathers. Their texture and their form were like a bat's wings, and he beat them so that 3 winds blew from him in one great storm. In these winds that freeze all Cocytus, he wept from his 6 eyes, and down 3 chins the tears ran mixed with bloody froth and pus.
Gross.
Just imagine like your controller shaking as he's like flapping his wings. In every mouth he worked a broken sinner between his rake-like teeth. Thus he kept 3 in eternal pain at his eternal dinner. For the one in front, the biting seemed to play no part at all compared to the ripping. At times the whole skin of his back was flayed away. That soul that suffers most, explained my guide, is Judas Iscariot, he who kicks his legs on the fiery chin and has his head inside. Of the other 2 who have their heads thrust forward, the one who dangles down from the black face is Brutus. Note how he writhes without a word. And there with the huge and sinewy arms is the soul of Cassius. But the night is coming on, and we must go, for we have seen the whole.
Yeah. Well, see now, getting into characters, and Cassius, of course, is from Julius Caesar. Yeah.
And Brutus, too.
Yeah, and Brutus, too. So, I mean, you're getting into literary references there, and those are not arcane at all. I mean, those are, we know Julius Caesar from Shakespeare. Probably a lot of people seen a movie that probably they were able to take it down.
And Judas, too, being like the notorious traitor.
Yeah. But one thing that just jumped out as you were telling me that is like, if you play this thing straight, it can get really grotesque. You can get grotesquer and grotesquer and push the envelope, scene after scene. But I was also thinking, like, what about Ghostbusters? Gozar, or whatever the name of that horrible character is in Ghostbusters, is a horrible character, but at the same time it's kind of comical, a little bit funny, something like that.
Yeah.
Or Monty Python. How would Monty Python take that character and do it? It would be like, have all those wings and all those jaws like clumping and a red face and white face and huge wings and everything like that. But at the same time, it would be almost cartoonish, like a parody of itself.
Well, Dante in and of himself could be parodied super easily.
Yeah.
And I think that might make him more likable.
I think so.
I think to rewrite him as this kind of holy paladin is a misnomer and a missed opportunity.
Yeah. So, I mean, and because you have opportunities at different levels of hell, some of them could be like really like creepy and frightening, and you can go like, that was a deliciously horrible experience.
Sure.
And others could be more amusing and more, self-referential and satirical, so that there's variety as you go through the levels. I wouldn't mind seeing the outer levels, if I remember, the ability to get into the thing, is the outer levels have people that are like, what did that person really do wrong?
Yeah.
It's like, I forget, like maybe they lied once in their life or something like that. It's like really minor stuff. And yet, you can't really play that up as a grotesquerie.
It doesn't work as well in the purgatory and the paradise areas.
Yeah.
But of the Inferno, I think there's just so much potential to make this some kind of like horrible, venture. And even to just see the vignettes of what it is that these people did wrong.
Yeah. Well, and you have to ask yourself, if you're going to design a thing like this, are you going to stick 100% of the text, or are you going to throw in a killer rabbit? That's invention, sticking something in that is not there, because you're being imaginative and you want to play it out. Or do you want to stick 100% to the text, faithful to the text?
Yeah,
it's a big question.
They do have the Forest of Suicides, so they have wiggle room with the talking trees and stuff.
Yeah.
The shrubbery.
Yeah.
It's a shrubbery.
It's a shrubbery. So it's a great question, but I mean, designing the thing, conceptualizing the thing would be fun. Designing it, I mean, that's for, I guess, engineers and artisans.
It would have to be a labor of love, which I think brings me to my last point is like, how would you even market this thing to a video game audience?
Well, yeah, because it's a rich visual experience.
Yeah.
A rich, you can't just go with a couple of images, a backdrop of maybe 4 backdrops. You've got a lot of detail to convey in this thing, and that doesn't even address like how do you deal with, okay, what's Cassius doing in there? What is Brutus doing in there? If that matters, if that's part of what you want a person to get out of it is broaden their knowledge of history and culture. You want them to be able to gain access to that.
Yeah.
If that's not your major goal, it's not your major goal. What is your major goal? Is your major goal thrills?
I mean, it depends. It depends how it's framed, but I think it could be some kind of mix of both. I think there is the thrill of just the journey through hell.
Yeah. But and like I said, I saw Zelda. What was he doing in Zelda? He was like he'd find some crystal, he'd pick something up, and he'd take something out of it. And there's no conflict.
Yeah.
Where's the conflict?
In the text when you go through it.
Yeah. What is it?
I mean, if you look at the central premise of the text, I guess you could say Dante is trying to discover like the meaning of life as a human and what it means to be human and how to live virtuously. So, I mean, I think the simplistic approach would be to like look at these, instances of like, human fault and then like answer quiz questions but obviously you don't want to do that in a video game.
Yeah. And it can't be like Monopoly, like, you go through and you accumulate properties and you're competing against somebody else for how much they're making and who's making more. It just doesn't make sense that way.
I think like the best approach would just maybe the true goal is as you were alluding to become as knowledgeable as possible so that you emerge the most virtuous. So then you want to strive for that 100% completion, having browsed and perused every cavity of the depths.
Yeah. You just don't want this thing approved by the Board of Education, because that'll kill it. It's like, this is a knowledge game. This is an educational game. I'm not interested.
No.
You want it to be transgressive, for the person going like, they want me to study this, but I'm going to do this. And without them even knowing it, they're going to become like the wisest human beings on the face of the earth, except for somebody who actually read Dante's Inferno about the subject matter.
Yeah.
So you're being kind of subversive.
Yeah.
Getting people to play a game that's cool and yet really, gain a level of sophistication, intellectual and sophistication that most people lack.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. Is I mean, even if you look at just the general trend of text to movie, so much is lost in translation. It's just so rare that we see anything text to game instead.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I remember couldn't have been more than 6-7 years old, right? And up there in the wall up in your bedroom, we posted, I don't know how many Pokemon there were, 146?
150, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, 150.
You knew them all.
Yeah.
You knew them all. You knew all the Pokemon and all the details and what their powers were and how the powers change if they can interact with each other.
Yeah.
How many gods are there on Mount Olympus?
Yeah.
Yeah. The appetite for that, I think, is in us.
Yeah.
To learn a pantheon.
Sure.
And there's a pantheon of bad guys in there.
Yeah.
That you could if you developed a flavor, taste for it, would really be something that I think kids would love. They'd love it as much as Pokemon.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if kids are the right target audience for this either. This is a very, thematic text.
Yeah.
It's it's trying to communicate the rights from wrongs. You do see the horrors and you know, sodomy, usury, all these kinds of terrible persons. And I think the audience would have to be a mature audience, intellectually and age-wise.
Well, yeah, I mean, for sodomy anyway.
Yeah, that, of course.
Usually, you know, maybe that's like a PG-13 thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, but yeah, it'll have to have a warning on it.
Oh yeah. Warning: you must appreciate Greek and Italian ancestry and heritage to play this game. But yeah, I mean, it was fun entertaining the brain and seeing what we could come up with. I think the resources are out there. If there was a market for it,
Well, see, I would play it. I mean, if it was a quest type game, not if it was like a fighting game. Not if it was Donkey Kong.
No Donkey. Okay.
Or Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
You know, you got to leap from this to this, and, you know, and when you land there, you got to kill things.
Yeah.
Things are behind you, and you got to jump over mushrooms that are springing up, and that's just like.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, there's museums that integrate this kind of technology, these virtual museums, and even colleges. You can go on virtual tours of colleges. A lot of kids do that nowadays when they don't know where they're going. So they just look at the computer and they can like do the Google Maps and like look around or something.
Yeah.
So I just think that it would be so much more valuable to actually try and translate this text to a visual medium than to simply rehash it as some type of action experience. Because that's just not what it is.
I remember before The Lord of the Rings was ever done on film.
Yeah.
When it was a book, you know, when there was a trilogy, right? There was the books by Tolkien. And we're anticipating, not that the Lord of the Ring, the films are going to come out, but Robert Bakshi did like a cartoon version of, what's that? It's not
The Hobbit.
The Hobbit, yeah.
Yeah.
And, some of it was really beautiful. It's like when those horses somebody's crossing the river, right?
Yeah.
And the horses come down with the water. It's just rushing down, this tidal wave, and it's the horses. No, it's the water. It's the horses, and here he is crossing this dead riverbank. It's like really, really effective. And when those hellhounds of Mordor or whatever they are, the guys on the horses are looking for him, really very effective. So we're anticipating, how could you translate The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings into film? It seemed impossible before it was done.
Mm-hmm.
Just like this, I think that it's possible.
Yeah.
We just haven't seen it happen yet.
Yeah. And let's see if it does. Let's see if the market is even out there. So, guys, in the comments, let us know, did you enjoy the discussion? And would you play our version of Inferno?
All right. Thanks for having me on.